this is a continuation of the EPIC project that we previously heard from IUA. It deployed at 3 locations in Southern California. So we first heard on a SCE territory deployment for Olivenhain, which Eric Harp represents. They happen to be in San Diego Gas and Electric. And you know, a little different rules from the utility side, but Eric has represented Olivenhain for close to 20 years now. He's overseen all of the system data management operations for controlling the systems, and it was key to our project that that is the method to observe and manage energy. So Eric was key in identifying which locations were suitable for energy improvement at Olivenhain, and he'll give us details on how the district operates, the challenges, and looking forward what their goals are for the future for energy management. So Eric, please lead us.
Hi, I'm Eric Harp with Olivenhain Municipal Water District, and like he said, I've been there about 20 years. Before that, I was a contractor doing instrumentation and controls, so I'm mostly speaking to you from an operational side. I'm not the bean counter, watch the spreadsheets, review the bills as much. I just wanted to say how much this program has meant to us. If any of you in the water industry are interested in hooking up with these guys to start going through analysis, I will tell you it's a very, very good education. The things that we've learned have saved us money, saved us time, but most importantly, they've brought us awareness to how to operate our system. Anybody who's just trying to push water and run pumps and run motors has focused on that for their career. Changing that behavior and changing that way of looking at how am I doing this? Am I doing this efficiently? Am I doing this in a way that saves my ratepayers money? Because that's really what it comes down to. We're trying to produce clean water at an affordable rate. So a little bit about our agency. We're in northern San Diego County. We have about 83,000 people. We're not a real big place, about 50 square miles. We have about 17 reservoirs, 80 million gallon per day capacity, 27,000 meters, 400 miles of pipe. We have a water treatment plant, a membrane filtration plant, and a water reclamation facility. Little schematic of the layout of our district. It's we've got a number of elevations. Of course, the higher elevations are harder to pump to, cost more money. But it's a very complex system with a lot of different pressure zones. So we began this project about 3 years ago with UC Riverside. In all honesty, I was not aware of this program. My predecessor before me, who left about 3 years ago, walked out the door and said, "Oh, by the way, we have this great program that you're now going to be involved in." So I said, "Great. What is it? What UC Riverside, what are they going to do?" Right? So they came in and told us a good story about how we're going to monitor our power. And I said, well, okay, what are they going to do? So for months and months and months and throughout the program, we've been reviewing electric bills, looking at all the different sites that we have in the district and saying, hey, where can we improve our efficiency? What can we do to become less costly at some of our sites? Our water treatment plant, it's a great facility. It has 2 energy recovery turbines that actually produce about 50% of our power for our water treatment plant. The downside is, even with that, we're still spending about $45,000 a month on electricity. We do have a third party we purchase electricity from through SDG&E. It's called Three Phases Renewable. We get about 7 cents a kilowatt hour. We're on contract with them for another 3 or 5 years, I forget. But that's the easy part. So we've got a guaranteed rate. I think some people were talking about guaranteed rates. It's a good way to do it. If you haven't done it, look into it if you can get involved in those programs. Problem we have is the demand charges, and that's probably the first thing that caught our attention and raised our eyebrows. Demand charges are something you have little control over. One of our facilities that we were investigating was a closed-loop pump station. So a closed-loop pump station, for those of you that don't know, is a pump station, typically on top of a hill where you're trying to pump into a zone, and it's just a big circle. We've got the pump station maintaining pressure. So we have 6 pumps in this pump station, and we noticed that our electric bill was pretty high on demand charges for that site. After investigating a little further, we realized that one of our pump technicians was going out monthly, and he would run all 6 pumps at the same time, just to test them. And we thought, wow, okay, how long are you doing this for? Oh, only about a half an hour. Well, remember that little story about 15 minutes and it ends up costing you all year long? So that was the first thing we thought, well, gosh, we have a generator out there. We have to test that too, right? Well, why don't we test the generator for 30 minutes, kick off the shore power and run these pumps, and we can run them as much as we want. And that reduced our bill by, I believe, in half. We cut it in half. So it took us a while to see the return on that, to get rid of that demand charge. So we thought, great, we've solved the problem. We have really solved this problem. We don't have to worry about that anymore, until the fire hydrant down below got hit. Fire hydrant got hit, and it ran all 6 pumps for about 20, 30 minutes. So how do we recover those costs? So we've been trying to figure out how do we recover these costs, and we're still trying to figure that out. How do you pass that cost on to the person that hit the fire hydrant? So the knowledge that they brought to this program was really good. But looking at the bills wasn't good enough. Integrating with our SCADA system was really the big thing for our water treatment plant. So we started looking at pump stations and water treatment plants, and we thought, gosh, we have the infrastructure already in place. We have power monitors on our switchgear. Why don't we just tie that into our SCADA system and start reviewing that data? So this is for our water treatment plant, our energy management system. We monitor real-time power consumption, and we've set some set points and parameters, high alarms, and we can actually trend what our actual use is. We look at peak periods, today's peak, current month's peak, last month's peaks, historical month's peaks. Most importantly, we're watching that instantaneous use, because you don't want those demand charges to kick in. So in the event that we start reaching those peaks, what do? Well, it doesn't show it on here, but we created a drop-down menu for our operators, because the operators are running this on-demand plant. How do they turn off the plant? They can't just turn off the plant. We're on demand. So the big key for us was to search around and see what we could do to reduce those usage spikes. Our main 2 users are our water treatment plant. One of them is a chlorine generation system, where we take salt basically and create our own sodium hypochlorite. Unfortunately, it's running at about 300 amps. It's a big high-use tool. Well, we thought, okay, well, let's put that on time of use and reduce our costs. So we did, and we were able to do that quite efficiently, except time of use back when we started was putting us at operating this thing during the night. And if anything went wrong with it, you had to test it, you had to operate it, troubleshoot it. You had to bring in people during the day. So that put us into a bit of a quandary. Recently, with the change from 4 to 9 p.m., we just saw all our operators and all our maintenance technicians get excited. They said, wow, this is great. We can work on this stuff during the day and not worry about it for less than 15 minutes. So our chlorine generation system was probably our highest use. Second was centrifuge, our dewatering centrifuge. That's another one that we have to actually run that almost all day, and trying to stay out of those peak times is really hard. So having the ability to, or the knowledge to know what you can turn off, even as much as turning off lights. If you're just trying to dip below an alarm set point just to keep you guys from getting higher costs, we walked around and went, okay, well, let's turn off the lights and see what that does. Well, we watched the little trend drop down a little bit. Okay, well, let's turn off some exhaust fans. And you watch the trend drop down, and you could really have control over your costs. So having this management tool was very beneficial. It's the beginning for us. You know, UC Riverside came in and did a lot for us to educate us, but it's hard to implement things in a speedy fashion. We have 200 pumps running throughout our district. I'm sorry, 600 pumps running throughout our district. And actually monitoring and maintaining the usage on every one of those is a bit of a challenge. So we implement these in steps. But now we can use this as a template, and we could use it at our pump stations, our wastewater treatment facility, or water reclamation, and anywhere else we can implement power monitoring. Even at our headquarters, we can do this. So that's a real beneficial tool. Validation, I think Mike had talked about validation and Pietro talked about validation. Part of this program was for a third party to come in and make sure we had gained something from this. But also this indicates what SDG&E's data and our energy management system data correlate to. And it matches up pretty darn close. So they monitor with their power monitor or their meter. You can get that data from SDG&E or SCE. They get real tired of hearing from me when you ask for a year's worth of 15-minute intervals or 3 years worth of 15-minute intervals, and they go, oh, not again. But they have to give it to you. So making sure that you're on track with what they're saying is always good. Plus, if you're seeing something different from them, you can call them up and say, hey, why am I seeing something different? It might be a problem on their end. So we talked a little bit about the site SCADA design and system integration. There are some challenges to that. I think Mike, you mentioned the different structure, architecture and hardware. If you're using Allen Bradley, Opto22, different PLCs for controls, you might want to think about how do you integrate that power monitor in with your SCADA controls, or do you have to come up with a different way of doing it? With today's technology, the Internet of Things, you can do almost anything over TCP. So that's what we did. We had this power monitor sitting in our switchgear. Never looked at it before. We had it in there for 15 years. Said, hey, you know, it's got an Ethernet port on the back. I bet we could put this on our process control network and dump it right in. Third-party integrator came in, programmed the screens, put a little programming in our PLCs, and we were up and running in a matter of weeks, gathering data. Displaying of energy use data and storage of historical data within the SCADA, allowing operators to monitor and reduce energy demand. Allowing the operators to monitor and reduce. That's a key point. Operators operate. They make water flow, they collect sewage, they make things work. They don't think about monitoring energy. Why would they? Their primary goal is to make sure the water stays in the pipe and the sewage stays off the street. So that was a big challenge for us, getting the operators to buy into this. And it's just like telling your kids to turn off a light. Operators don't want to turn their stuff off. But we found that there were a few key players within the different departments that you could get them to spearhead this. They get real excited about it. Oh gosh, okay, we're having a rate increase moment. SDG&E sends out 24-hour notices every once in a while during the summertime saying, hey, we're going to have peak pricing, critical peak pricing event tomorrow. What can you shut down? Well, if you're an on-demand system, you have closed loop, you can't. But then if you can get your operators to think, well, hey, I know I can shut this process off, then they start doing the work for you. Getting their buy-in and their involvement is a key factor. Instantaneous and 15-minute average real-time energy use monitoring. Once again, that 15 minutes is a hard thing to beat. If you have a hydrant hit, like we did, there's nothing we can do about that. We can't control that. We can run out and try and shut those pumps off. But the key is having the SCADA ability to know that. If you have a pump station like our closed loop and you see a high flow or a low pressure go off somewhere, your operator jumps on the SCADA, he might be able to catch that before 15 minutes happens. Monitoring and alarming is a big key factor in this program. Alarm notification optimized to provide operators. Once again, giving the operators the ability to do this. Don't put it in one person's hands. Don't put it in their office. Having the operators do the work for you is a key point to all this. Any questions? Yes.
You're just talking about your closed loop system. I know it's a bit off topic there. Is it closed loop just because you can't get storage up there? Is it just too high?
Well, I know you're from Vallecito. I know you have some sites. You've got all the peaks with all the reservoirs on them. We have some places like our Rancho Cielo development, lots sell for over $1 million. The ones on the top of the hill sell for even more. So they don't let us put reservoirs on top of the very high dollar lots. So that's where we end up with trouble. And we only have a few closed loop systems, but those are the hardest ones to manage. One of the advantages that we found through this program too is optimizing the controls. We're not just talking about when to turn things on and when to turn them off. We're talking about if you have a pump station that's got pump control valves with pilot systems that block the water essentially. For those of you that don't know how it works, you have a pump turn on, you have a control valve. That control valve slowly opens, slowly closes. If you overpressurize, it'll pressure relief to a dump somewhere, maybe the suction side of the pump station. If those systems are not working efficiently, you're going to be seeing an energy cost. So evaluating that, that's one of the things we've been doing recently, is picking some of these closed loop pump stations and going over the pilot controls, going over when pumps start, when they stop. Is there something we can do? Simple tweaks to the control system can change dramatically. So you can't just look at the bill, you can't just look at the power consumption, and you can't just turn things on or off. You have to optimize it. So, and I know I'm kind of coming from the operational side, so if you have any questions on that, please feel free to ask. I've been around pumps, motors, and SCADA and telemetry for a long time, and that's kind of where my focus has been. Mike?
Having the one treatment plant equipped to monitor energy, you know, that's 1 meter out of, I don't know, 50,
96.
96 meters. So what are the next steps and what's happening in the future at all?
Good question. The next steps we have is seeing the other pump stations that we have that we know we can make changes to. I have 3 pump stations that pump to reservoirs right now, putting on time of use controls and power monitors so that we can evaluate those as well. So we have at least 3 right now that we're working at. The other thing we're working on is our wastewater collection system. Now, when we started the program, we said, hey, there's nothing you could do. You know, people flush the toilets, we collect the sewage, we process the sewage. But what we can do, and what we started implementing, is going through those collection stations, those pump stations, and saying, what can we do to run off-peak, time of use? If we can, then great, but sometimes you can't. So if you can set up a system like we're doing right now, where you can actually set time of use and use a variable speed drive to run your pumps, you can run a pump longer and keep it off of time of use, and if only in emergencies turn it on. Most of our pumps, our sewage collections, have 48-hour storage, so you can optimize that a little bit better too. Yes?
You mentioned 2 of the most energy-intensive processes were chlorine generation and the dewatering centrifuge.
Yes.
Do these run all the time or some percentage of the time?
The chlorine generator usually runs about 11 hours, and we do it off-peak. So we stay at it. We do have some flexibility.
To run these processes.
Yes. Normally, we'll start up probably around 9:30 p.m., run it through the night if we need to. But if we want to, we can run it during the day now. We try and just run that based off of level controls in the storage containers, and absolutely block out 4 to 9. So
Thank you.
the centrifuge does run all day, though. Unfortunately, I don't know, any of you in the water industry may have just found out that we just went back to State Water Project water Saturday. So State Water Project water has a little different chemistry to it than what we're used to with the Colorado River. So for us, what that means is we end up dewatering a lot more and changing the chemistry of the water. So we're kind of stretching our limits, and we are running in peak times now. So I think in our future, we'll be looking at a redundant centrifuge system where we have 2 that run during the day off-peak. Yeah, I think it would save us money.
Maybe you can consider other kind of dewatering systems too?
That would be a good idea as well, yeah. Right now, we have just this one system, yeah.
I forget, what's the capacity of your...
Treatment plant?
Yeah.
I think we're at about 40 MGD. I'm sorry. Yeah, 40 MGD. Any other questions, Mike?
Alden Hine, I think has had huge growth in the last 15 years as service
In the last
territory.
19 years that I've been there, it's
Yeah.
been growing exponentially, yes.
So looking into the future and continued growth, how much is energy consumption of the projected growth going to play a
Well,
decision
it
in?
plays a huge part, to be honest, and that's one of the things I probably should have mentioned. This education that we've received has not only affected what we currently have, but how we design things for the future. So when we start looking at pump stations now and putting in switch gear, power monitors, automatically in our spec now, we put everything on SCADA. We want to monitor absolutely everything. Other considerations too is if you do design changes to existing facilities, what rate schedule are you in right now? And if you make any changes, what would that mean? For example, SDG&E just did an audit through us and said, hey, by the way, we're changing this pump station to a different rate schedule because we noticed you're using more energy, and it puts you in a higher rate schedule. So I thought, okay, well, what can we do? We're building a new pump station. How can I keep that below that threshold so that I don't go into a new rate schedule? They checked our maintenance facility at our headquarters and said, oh, by the way, you have an option for a new rate schedule. You can drop down to this lower tier and you'll be in good shape. Next question was, okay, give me the last 12 months usage on this meter and tell me what I was using, how close I am to that 40 kilowatts or whatever it was that they were putting that threshold at. So changing the way you think about every bit of design has come into play now if you want to save on electricity.
Our next speaker represents Rancho Cucamonga Valley Water District. And essentially, Mike Messis has been in the water industry for 16 years and served various roles. But he's currently manager of operations at Cucamonga Valley Water District. And this region, I don't know if they joke between water districts, but they're essentially the potable water supply to the water that ends up in Catro's Inland Empire Utility Agency that's
We exchange, yeah.
Yeah.
They pumps it back up to us.
Yeah. So, yeah, this project, the interesting thing is today's the first day that we brought the three agencies together in the same room to kind of exchange information on their experiences in the project. But Cucamonga Valley's done a very good job of implementing the energy improvements throughout their district, and Mike Messis is going to share some of the site information and the advancements and their experiences on the project.
How's it going? I'm Mike, everybody. So what I'm going to be talking about is, it's very similar. Actually, it's kind of cool to see that we're all very consistent with our projects, what we've been doing. It'll be similar where I'm going to talk about just the operations standpoint and what we did over at Cucamonga Valley Water, or what we started to do, I guess is probably more appropriate, to find out what this project means and how we could possibly scale it out to the rest of our operations side. Like always, I'll give you guys a background of who we are, right? So we're Cucamonga Valley Water District. We service the area of Rancho Cucamonga primarily. We span out a little bit over into Upland, Fontana. And then, of course, all we do is we treat potable water. We have potable water production that basically comes from three sources. We have state project water. So that comes in. We have a 60 million gallon a day water treatment facility, conventional treatment plant. We also have groundwater, and our groundwater is just, we come from two basins, Chino Basin, Cucamonga Basin. And then we have some surface runoff that comes through from the local sources, the local canyon sources, and we run those through our treatment facilities as well. About similar size, about 47 square miles, 48,000 water connections, 37,000 sewer connections, about 50 MGD, our average daily demand, right? Kind of one of the big things for the district is we focus on service, water, and people. That's kind of something to kind of highlight in here, because the question was asked for Pietro, how do you get those things together, right? How do you get all these people to work together towards a common goal? And that's what we do. We do the same thing over at Cucamonga. We make sure that we're that we're providing a service, right? We use the right people to do it. And of course, we're water only, so we kind of focus on just water alone. But all of our decision making is going to be focused on kind of those three elements. And this project fits into that as well. So here's our distribution overview system. We have 8 different pressure zones. We're lucky. I always say that we got like the master plan perfect design of a water distribution system. Nothing is closed loop, right? So all of our pumps pump up to another reservoir that's open to atmosphere. We have 8 different pressure zones, and we're built on a hillside, which is pretty nice because it goes from the bottom to the top. It's kind of that easy. We don't have any hills or valleys in between. And our elevations kind of range anywhere from 1,000 feet, kind of being the bottom of our district, to about 3,000 feet at the top of the district. Let's see. We have about 24 different reservoir sites, 35 reservoirs, 95 million gallons of storage inside of our system if we were to top everything off. But I don't know, one day I'll do it, you know. We'll be like, yeah, we got all 95, and we'll keep it all staying inside the reservoir, right? This graphic kind of shows this is just our total storage, 73 million. That's about average of what we have inside of our system right now. We have 19 different booster stations, 7 disinfection systems, 29 wells, groundwater production. We average, well, we shoot for about 47,000. That's our annual production, 47,000 acre feet a year. And of that 47,000, we figure about 14,000 from groundwater, 30,000 from imported water, state project water, and then also 3,000 from our surface water flows. So kind of just looking at this, it'll populate, but we basically have boosters. We have wells, right? Our wells produce water out of the ground. From the ground, it goes to a reservoir. From the reservoir, then we boost it up to the following zone. So you can see kind of just from the way that we're set up, our wells are all these kind of vertical alignment. Majority of our production is down below this zone 4 level. Actually, the majority of our production is inside of zone 1. So a lot of our production that has to be done is being pumped out of a well, and then it's got to move 8 zones all the way up the whole district. So we're moving a lot of water. Our treatment facilities are located here in the 3 zone, and I'll kind of give you the importance of this, because one of the things that we learned about this project is not necessarily how does it work to this pilot, but how does this pilot scale out to the overall operations? And then we have different seasonal pricing. So it's like, where should we produce? If we want to produce 47,000 total, how do we produce that? Do we do it during the whole year, or do we shift our production from zone to zone? So it's kind of a cool thing. So well water production, 1 zone. State project water in the 3 zone. And then up here this is one of our, up in the 5A zone or 5 zone, we have our surface water flows that come in. That's our crown jewel. It's free water, right? At a high elevation. It's like perfect. So being consistent with everybody, this project, customized energy management system, supervisory control data acquisition system. The goal is to have an energy management system and our SCADA system integrated together, right? We never had that before. We never had an energy management system. The one thing that we did have on our side is all of our controls is on one single platform. So it's kind of nice once we bring in the energy management software, or energy management system, then we could integrate that with all the rest of the controls throughout the rest of the district. And then also implementation of energy monitoring and management strategies, integration of SCADA and EMS, and then a demonstration of water system energy improvements. And this is what we'll start going into immediately, which is basically what was that pilot, what did that look like? The big thing too is there's a partnership that happened here. It's a partnership between our local government, right? So that there's a grant that's available. Academia, UCR, they have the best rates for all of their system designers, their research. Your guys' rates are bar none, top rates, right? We partnered with UCR. I'd always tell Henry and Alfredo, I feel bad giving you this data because, you know, are there any students inside of here for UCR? Okay, I want to apologize to you guys if they were, because I feel horrible because like, man, there's a ton of data. And it's like, don't worry, our students will take care of it. That's what they do. And it's like, man, that's awesome, you know, versus like, okay, start that T&M clock, right? So it was a great partnership with UCR. And then also the utility, we're on our side. On our side, we do all of we do everything in-house. So in-house, we could do the SCADA integration, we could do the electrical. That was kind of our part on our side. And then I got the same graphics for the CEC, so thank you. Edison's our utility provider. And then we'll talk about Opto and OSI Pi. So this is the pilot site, Reservoir 1C. So we started off kind of on that general overview graphic. 1C is down in the bottom corner. Actually, this is our little graphic that shows kind of our district from south to north and then from west to east, right? So this particular facility is down here on the bottom right-hand side of our district. Geographically, that's where it sits. And inside of this site, we have 3 wells and we have 5 boosters. It's important to know that when we look at this one site, we look at this site as a production site, not necessarily a physical location, because one of the wells is actually off-site. So it has its own Edison meter, it has its own demand fees, so it's separate, but it affects this whole system. Yeah, okay, so on-site, right, so we have these 3 wells, or 39 and 40. They're pretty decent-sized motors. One of them 700 horsepower, the other one 600 horsepower. I have kind of the breakout there of the KW and then also the flow that these guys produce. Our boosters, they're all 300 horsepower boosters. And then we have the potential, I hope we never ever see it, but of a demand of 2,095 kilowatts, right? So we were focusing on demand fees for this project. The way that our demand fees are calculated, it's like $19 per KW. Right? So imagine 19 bucks times this, right? That's our baseline fee. So our focus for this whole project was just basically on those demand fees. That was like our initial goal, but we learned a ton from this whole thing. So I thought, I'm not going to have a good presentation unless I have a complicated chart, so I put it on here, but it's only one. Okay. So this chart basically goes from 2017 to 2018. On the right axis, or the right, you'll see that this is our Edison bill, going from $0 to $100,000. Each one of these is a month, and then on the left side, this is our KW demand for that month. The light blue is actually the bill. The dark blue is the KW demand. So you can see kind of in the beginning, our total bill, a lot of it was on KW demand, right? And then kind of moving back over this way, we have a large bill, but our demand is getting smaller. Yes?
So the light blue is the energy.
The light blue is actually the bill amount. Yeah, I should have flipped it the other way.
Total bill.
Total bill
Demand
amount.
charge plus energy.
Demand plus energy, correct. Correct. So you can kind of see that our demand fees were higher initially. Let's see. So, that's kind of a good question, is like, why are those demand fees higher, right? And on the operations side, I always say that our system was designed to meet the maximum daily demand, but we don't need to operate it that way, right? So since it was designed to do that, did we need to fire everything up right now in order to get water to move and then shut everything down, right? The other thing was the samples and running pumps and running motors when we didn't need to, or running them out of sequence. Instead of firing everything up and then going and taking those samples and calling it a day, we'd joke around, it's like, man, that was a $30,000 sample, right? It's like, that was too much money. So it was really learning those operational changes of how to limit the amount of demand that we're seeing throughout our system. Yeah.
Electric bill is often driven by anomalies, and
Right.
I think your final bar in the graph is one of those anomalies, right? Where you had a plant shut down or
We
something.
did. So, I'm very intimate with all these bars, right? We go back, we have history together. But yeah, this was a shutdown in December. And in December, we had to shut down our treatment facility, which was up in the 3 zone, and we had to make up our production in the groundwater side. But along with that, this is kind of something we learned from it, is let's do that stuff in the wintertime when our demand fees and our costs are lower, right? So let's do that maintenance on the treatment side and then make up for it on the groundwater side. And the other cool thing is, even though it was a lot larger bill, our demand fees were smaller in comparison. And just to kind of give you guys one of our key performance indicators, it's that cost per acre foot. So kind of going from this range back in 2017, our cost per acre foot were $141 an acre foot, right? In 2018, our cost per acre foot has dropped down about $92 an acre foot. So it's kind of, what does this turn into, right? So, and then this site, I think the site does about, I won't tell you the acre feet this thing produces. I don't want to be wrong. So this was kind of the initial approach was, okay, we're going to have 2 iterations. One of them is, does the system work? Using UCR's infrastructure, using all of their equipment. So the first approach was to go through, do an installation. We used a Shark meter, which is an energy monitoring device. It uses TCP, so we could pull all kinds of data from it. And the thing is it has to go out to somebody else, and we're big on security. So it's like, how do we put this inside so that way the security is not a factor for Cucamonga and allow people to see this information live without taxing our people for giving that information to them. So we started off with this little system. It includes a Shark meter, a PLC, controller. Once we got to this red point, now it became UCRs, so we sent that out to their controller, their opto, their cell phone modem, and then it was outside of our network. So there was nothing coming back. It was just all getting sent out to their network, outside of our network. So these are just kind of pictures of the diagram showing how it was done. This is a picture of the controller, the opto, and then the cell modem going out. And then this is the actual, the energy meter. And every time I think that we got like this killer deal on these meters, I hear about some other meter that's out, and I'm like, wow, that's a really killer deal, so. But they're really nice. You could get all kinds of information. You could get voltage per phase, you could get max kW, you could pull all kinds of information. They're very helpful meters. And this one in particular could do 8 3-phase circuits, which is pretty nice. So in that iteration number 1, it went out to UCR, and UCR did a great job. They provided us a user interface. They provided us with some good data. We had our KW per piece of equipment that's out there, so all the wells and then all the boosters. They also provided us like the site. They gave us our current month's peak for KW, our last month's peak, and this information was great. The only thing about this information is it was on somebody else's network, which was nice because they could develop it. So the second iteration was actually bringing it inside of our network, and that's kind of where we're at today. And again, I was looking at everybody's as like, do we all have the same graph? We don't, so we're good, right? So we had to go through, we had to have our verification done. So again, it's the same graph that you guys have seen before, different values, but very similar. We had our internal, so this is the OSI soft data that was coming through the network, and then we have the Fluke data, which was actually a Fluke meter that was sitting there connected, so we were doing our comparisons that way. That OSI Pi software, again, they gave us some really good information. Anybody here represent operations operators? Yeah? No? I'll tell you all kinds of cool stories about operators then, right? Operators like having the same interface and something that's familiar to them in order to operate a system. I don't know if you guys has anybody ever driven somebody else's car that's a high-tech car? Yeah? You feel like, I don't even want to drive this car? Right? So for our operators, this was a really high-tech car, right? And it was like, I don't know, how do we use this information? How does that integrate? I got to carry an iPhone and a tablet now, right? Sounds silly, but those things are very important, especially when you're dealing with 15 minutes, right? So, but this is what UCR developed, and we were like, man, that's nice. Now we just got to make it look like the rest of our stuff. So that came to iteration 2. Iteration 2 was a little bit different block diagram. So now we still have the Shark, we still have the PLC. Now it's going to the CVWD server, which is where the OSI Pi software was installed. And then now we're integrating it in with our SCADA system. So we talked about monitoring and then alarms. Those are very important functions. Now that those alarms are there, they're coming through our system. It's something that our operators are familiar with, right? So that's part of the integration. And one of the things we got was we got a new, it's a Stratus server, which is nice. We have OSI Pi, which is a great number cruncher. So those are 2 big benefits to the district. And then this is just a comparison between iteration 1 going through UCR's hardware and then iteration 2 going through, Cucamonga Valley Water District's hardware. Complicated, right? So like all kinds of numbers going on in the background. Let me say this other part. I work with really, really smart people that are really, really great, and they know how to make this information into something that's very usable for our operators. And I'll kind of show you a couple demonstrations of it, just what it looks like on our system. So this is the integration of our SCADA system. So what you'll see is this is well 39, 40, and 43, they're controls. And it's just a color code system that says, red to green. Who's the lowest kWh per acre foot to run, right? So the operator should see that no reds should be running without greens. So they make their set points according to, okay, let's run the greens first and the reds last, right? So that's how it was integrated with our wells. Our boosters, same thing. So you have this, this green to red or green to dark orange on this one. And what they could do is they could designate which booster is the lead pump, the lag pump, lead, lag 1, lag 2, lag 3, so that way we could minimize, the kWh per acre foot. Then going over to the demand side, this is something new. This graphic, I don't know if you can see this little bar graph in the background. That bar graph kind of shows, it shows a couple things. One is this is the maximum amount of acre feet that this pump could do in a day. So that's what all these numbers are. The bar graph is how many is it doing. So the goal is to basically be able to look on the control system and say, that pump is running 100%. This pump looks like it's running 90%, and this guy's cycling about 30% a day. The worst thing to see is have all of these guys at 25%, right? Because then that means that we're hitting our demand fee. So it's kind of just on the approach of being proactive on it, and then the demand fee alarms coming in afterwards as the reactive measure. So that's the integration. That's going from that OSI Pi interface to our control system interface. Again, looking back at 1C, this is how it plays out to the wells and the boosters and how we operate them. One more learning factor that we learned was we have to sample this one well every month regardless, and it's all by itself. So instead of running that along with the other equipment on the site, even though it's a higher kWh per acre foot, it decreases the demand fee from the site. So we run that well first. So that way we keep our demand fees down. So just little things, just a different perspective on how we operate. And then again, I thought, yeah, they'll see that complicated chart one more time, right? Just in case you guys want to see it. Other than that, I mean, that's basically our system. It just, in summary, these were our goals. We learned way more than these goals, and we're going to scale it out. The cool thing is like, man, once we get that hardware, once we get that software, once we integrate it in, and we test out that pilot, learn from that pilot, we can scale it out, because the thing that we have in our favor is we're using that same control system software as our platform for everything throughout Cucamonga Valley Water District.